Check, check. Check.
Okay, we're on. Okay, thank you, thank you. We're about to start. So I'd like to, my name is Artie Harris, Chair of the Planning Board, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to our joint meeting. We haven't had it in a couple years, and so this is so delighted that we're able to start this again. So I'd like to thank you for joining us and bringing your expertise to the county. This is so important to have you to serve on the commission. This time to connect and overview shared initiatives is critical importance given the overlapping roles we play in supporting the future of the county. So thank you. I wanted to take a moment and highlight 4 key objectives of the Planning Board. The first is to accelerate housing production, especially affordable housing in the county, all housing types, everywhere, all income levels, but especially affordable housing. The second is to advance regional collaboration and coordination. The third is to implement Montgomery Thrive 2050 with its focus on community equity, commitment to environmental resilience, and dedication to economic health. And the last is to implement the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, we call it the PROS Plan internally. I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you better. We started out at dinner getting to know each of you, but as we work through the next few years to know each of you better and identifying even more ways we can work collaboratively. I want to invite Bob to provide some additional remarks, if he'd like. Bob and I had lunch on Tuesday, and It was such a great opportunity for us to get to know each other. So thank you so much. And looking forward to our discussion tonight, and welcome again. We have lovely people all tonight. We Planning Board members here that are able to, Sean Bartley and Vice Chair Mitra Pedoim, I'm as Chief of Staff, and we have several members of the planning staff tonight, our newly elected or appointed planning director. You've met, you've met with them several times, and thank you, Rebecca, for helping to organize this. So thank you so much, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I will be merciful. Oh, here, let me turn this baby on. I will try to be mercifully short. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to get together. You're all new. Some of us have been here for a while. Some are relatively new. But I think it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to work together, because I think we share the same goals. We want to make our community, our county, much more livable. We want to make it interesting. And I think the two things that we do, planning and historic preservation, really fit beautifully together. And I'm just really looking forward to working with you. And I so enjoyed getting acquainted with you on Tuesday, and I hope we can continue that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and we'll turn it over to Rebecca to take us through the evening.
Great. This is on. Yes. Thank you. Good evening, Chair Harris, Chair Sutton, and members of the Planning Board and the Historic Preservation Commission, and also welcome to our Historic Preservation team and our incoming Planning Director, Jason Sartori, and our support staff here tonight. So I have a PowerPoint to run through with all of you, so we'll get that started. The examples you're going to see tonight really highlight the work of all 3 of our groups, of the Historic Preservation Commission, of the Planning Board, and of the Historic Preservation Office, around that intersection between, historic preservation and community resilience, and, highlighting again some wonderful projects here in Montgomery County. So I have this presentation, but the way we've kind of structured this, sort of the way we've structured this dinner, we hope, people will jump in, have questions, it'll spark discussions, with the slides that I'm showing. So I wouldn't wait until the end necessarily if people have, questions or comments or want to talk amongst yourselves about anything that I'm showing here tonight. So we wanted to start off by going around and having brief introductions of the board members, the commissioners, and the staff. So I guess we'll start here on my right. And for the staff in particular, if you could just say really briefly, what it is that you do here in the Historic Preservation Office.
Hello, hello. I'm Brian Crane. I'm the archaeologist for the Historic Preservation Department, and my principal responsibilities, in addition to archaeology, is managing the burial sites inventory.
Good evening. I'm Mark Dominiani. I'm a commissioner on the Historic Preservation Commission. I've joined the commission in April, relative newcomer. And what else can I tell you? I live in Potomac, and yeah, very happy to be here and to meet you all.
Thank you. So again, I'm Rebecca Ballo, and I'm the Historic Preservation Supervisor here in the Planning Department.
Thank you. I'm Jason Sartori, and as Chair Harris mentioned and Rebecca mentioned, I'm the incoming director of the Planning Department, but I've been working here in the Planning Department for about 8 years, and for about 5 years, I've had the distinct pleasure, and it really has been an absolute pleasure, to be the chief of our countywide planning and policy division, of which the Historic Preservation Office is part. And it's been really great to work very closely with Rebecca and her team, all outstanding, as you all know very well, and our board knows as well. Outstanding professionals and really, really great at what they do. And so it's been a real pleasure of mine to have had that opportunity over the last 5 years. So.
Good evening. Alana Branza. I am the Chief of Staff for the Planning Board office and just joined in September and really looking forward to getting to support both boards and work with everyone here.
Good evening. I'm Sean Bartley. I am a commissioner on the planning board, and I am a local attorney here in Montgomery County. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Mitra Peduim. I am one of the commissioners and currently this year I'm vice chair for the planning board.
Yeah, Artie Harris again. I was thinking there were 2 times I came in front of the Historic Preservation Commission in my time here. When I first started, I worked with the Bizzuto Group, and my first job was to buy and renovate and do a development above the Bethesda Theater. And so I came in front of the Historic Preservation at that time. Gwen Wright was a planner there, and then also one of the architects that were working with us was a woman named Mary Airline. And you know, and at the time, that was right after 9/11, and Mary also was chosen to replace the I think it was sandstone or limestone on the Pentagon that was hit. So I worked with Mary, and I so loved, she was just a wonderful person to work with, yeah. And then when I live in Tacoma Park, and our house happens to be in the Historic Preservation area, and so we had to come in front of you to, when we had our house renovated. So thank you for, yeah. No, always great, thank you.
Again, I'm Bob Sutton, and I live in the building that you renovated. And it's wonderful, wonderful what you did with the building and with the theater. It's great. I'm the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm the geezer, both in age and time I've served on the board. But my career was in the National Park Service, and I started working, I'm telling you how old I am. I started working in historic preservation in 1974 in the Oregon Historic Preservation Office. And it was not long after the Historic Preservation Act was passed. And it was a challenge to try to convince people that historic buildings were worth saving. So I've done it for a while, and I'm really enjoying this. And I'm really, as I said earlier, really looking forward to working with you all. Thank you.
I'm Karen Burnett. I'm the vice chair of the HPC. I live in Silver Spring, very close to Tacoma Park, and I'm an architect. And what I like about being on the HPC, besides preserving buildings and helping people keep their buildings, in good health, but the other part about being on the HPC is you get to drive all over the county to check out these buildings and see parts of the county you've never seen before. And I pretty much grew up in Montgomery County, and I didn't even know some of the little squirrely corners of the county that have historic properties in them. So it's been a lot of fun to explore the county while, trying to save the historic properties in the county.
I'm Jeff Haynes. I'm an architect. I have a small practice based out of Bethesda, Maryland. I do work all over the metropolitan area. I came in with Karen, how long is it, 2019. Wow. Time flies. And I've so enjoyed serving on the commission As Karen said, we get to see parts of the county and explore parts of the county that I may not have ever really seen or understood. And so for that, I really have enjoyed work. And to work with the other fellow commissioners has been a real pleasure.
I am Cristina Arado. I'm an architect, and I've been doing historic preservation projects for 30 years. I served with the commission for as long as Karen and Jeff, and it's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can continue to do this to save some of the historic buildings in the county.
Excuse me. I'm Julie Pelletier. I'm an architect. Karen kind of got me going on the Historic Preservation Commission. I've been on since 2020. I live in the non-historic part of Tacoma Park, so I can do whatever I want to my house without having to come in front of the board. I do live in an old house, but it's not in the historic district. But yeah, I've really enjoyed getting to know the county. I've lived here for 40-some odd years, and it's still amazing to show up at these houses and be like, what neighborhood is this? I've never, ever been here before. So that's pretty cool. And working with everybody, I've learned a ton. So looking forward to working with the planning board.
Good evening. I'm James Doman. I've been on the Historic Planning Commission, Preservation Commission for 3 years, and my term I just re-upped again, I guess, so I'm good for another 3 years. I'm not an architect, okay? We have a lot of architects here. I'm not an architect. I bring to the commission building experience. I'm retired now, but in my previous life when I was working, I was a home improvement contractor. I had the privilege of working on a lot of historic houses, historic porches. I know how difficult some of these things are to redo and to rebuild, so I can give a little insight on what the applicant is coming forth to our commission. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Michael Galway, also obviously a commissioner on the HPC. I joined last year. Like Jim, I'm not an architect either. Actually, I'm a registered professional engineer who got a start a Louis Sullivan building in Buffalo, New York called the Guarantee Building. And that just inspired me to focus on historic restoration for the rest of my career, which is 41 years now. So welcome, everyone.
Good evening, Zara Nasser. I joined the commission almost 2 years ago. It was during COVID. I remember first meetings were online. I live in Silver Spring. I'm an architect, and I've always been interested in preservation, and I actually got a master's degree in preservation from University of Maryland. I'm not doing much preservation work right now, but I enjoy being on the commission, learning from other commissioners, and getting to know the county better. Oh, you got yours.
Hello. Michael Kine, Historic Preservation Staff. Been here for a while. I did a regulatory review for about 8 years, and for the last year or so, I've been primarily managing the tax credit program.
I'm Kevin Manarola. I'm the permit technician. I primarily handle permit intake and coordinate with the applicants to make sure they get everything to us.
Hi, I'm John Lieberts. I'm with the Historic Preservation staff. I do a little bit of everything. I do some regulatory review with our historic area work permits. I work on our master planning efforts, both designating and nominating individual properties and writing those reports and working on the sector and area teams. And I project manage some of our special studies.
Thank you. And then Dan Bruckert, who is also our regulatory reviewer, couldn't be here this evening. He's a little under the weather, but we do have some content featuring Dan very prominently that we'll be showing you this evening. So it'll be like he is here with us. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So next slide. So I'm going to try and get the regulatory jargon out of the way early while you all are still with me, and then we'll go through the project highlights. So just bear with me for a little bit. So roles and responsibilities of our three groups, because we are three distinct and yet overlapping, bodies. So there is the Historic Preservation Commission. Very briefly, the HPC is a quasi-judicial commission empowered with regulatory approval authority over historic area work permits, and they have other roles and duties described in the county code under Chapter 24A. And while I'm going through this as well, this would be a good time to point out at everybody's seat, there's an FAQ on historic preservation and the master planning process and the role of the HPC. So I'm not really going to cover all of this tonight, but there's some, helpful keywords and terms and process descriptions in here, and you can have this to take away with you. So the HPC is, a separate body from the planning board. The HPC members are appointed by recommendation of the county executive with confirmation by the county council. And the HPC then recommends historic site and district designations to the planning board. We also talked about some of this, last week in my presentation to the planning board. The HPC can also advise the planning board and the council or other authorities. Sometimes the HPC will write letters to the hearing examiner, for example, about other matters having to do with historic preservation. The HPC also makes recommendations on tax credit applications that go directly to the Department of Finance, another separate county agency. And the HPC is staffed by the Office of the County Attorney. So Walter Wilson is our attorney with the county. So whenever a work permit is appealed up to the Board of Appeals or there's another legal matter, the HPC is represented by the county attorney's office out of the county executive branch. So then we come to the planning board, and this is again largely for the HPC members. So just talking about the role of the planning board in relation to historic preservation matters. So the planning board, when looking at designations, uses the same criteria in Chapter 24A3 to make recommendations about historic site and district designations to the county council. And again, these designations are amendments to the master plan for historic preservation. Right here. This is our master plan, adopted in 1979. So every designation is technically an amendment to this plan document, right? The planning board also makes recommendations on historic easements to the council and the executive. The planning board makes budget recommendations for the Historic Preservation Office as part of the larger planning department budget. The planning board also sets budget and work priorities for MNC PPC owned and designated historic properties on their parkland. The planning board is responsible for adding sites to the burial sites inventory. And then the planning board has the authority to add or remove sites from the locational atlas and index of historic sites, which actually I can pass this around so people can take a look at this if you haven't seen the in the flesh 1976 version of the locational atlas. We still have some of these. So then we have the Historic Preservation Office, which is my team, our group in the planning department. So the Historic Preservation Office, we staff both the commissions. We staff the planning board and we staff the HPC. The HPO is also recognized as the certified local government for Montgomery County. This is a term under the National Historic Preservation Act for federal and state undertakings. So our office also participates as a separate group for federal and state undertakings. So the HPC may comment, the MNCPPC and Planning Board may comment, but then also the Historic Preservation Office may comment as well. Our office can also separately apply for grant funding for special projects. We partner with third parties for grant funding for other, preservation projects. We also, as the staff, we have to participate in county executive mandated training for their BCCs, for their boards, committees, and commissions. I have to do that on a monthly and sometimes a bi-monthly basis. Staff also appear as witnesses for DPS and DHCA when court cases involving historically designated properties go to district court. I'm in court several times a year. Our staff work with the Office of the County Attorney and with the MNC PPC attorneys, depending on the item. And then our office also administers historic preservation easements on behalf of Montgomery County government, okay, on behalf of the executive and the council, so separate from the planning board, and then even the HPC. So we have all of these sort of overlapping, interweaving responsibilities. All right, next slide. So the way I've structured the rest, or a lot of the rest of this presentation tonight, is to give you examples of different case studies just from the last 5 or 6 years that highlight where the HPC has been, doing work and undertaking efforts that align actually very beautifully with the pillars in our recently adopted Thrive Montgomery 2050 general plan. So we'll go to the next slide. So the first pillar is racial equity and social justice. So Jason also has a copy of Thrive that we can pass around for folks who want to take a look. So Thrive Montgomery 2050 in terms of historic preservation and racial equity specifically talks about designating more sites associated with African American heritage and with Native American heritage. Our office has also been working very consciously as part of our designations to bring forward stories and sites associated with underrepresented minority communities in Montgomery County. So for example, we have recently listed the Pien House, which is located in Potomac as part of the Potomac Overlook Historic District designation. It's an outstanding resource. We also recently listed the Edward U. Taylor School in Boyd's for African American history. And then we have the Hefner Park Community Center in Tacoma Park that is part of the upcoming Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment. Next slide. Another way that our office in historic preservation has been working to foster racial equity and social justice has been with our partnership with the Scotland AME Zion Church in Potomac. So this is a designated master plan site that suffered some devastating flooding in the summer of 2019 and then again actually in 2020. So when the church reached out to my office, we basically became a partner with the church in all of their efforts. So the first thing, we worked with the state to get the church included within the Montgomery Heritage area that allowed them to become eligible for more grant funding to fix the building. This is a multi-million-dollar, many-year effort, and they needed, all the help they could get along the way, and the community really rallied for that. So our office, we successfully applied for 3 state grants totaling $290,000 to start them with their building rehabilitation efforts. I managed the grants on behalf of the church with the state. I organized internal permitting and regulatory review groups so they could have a central clearinghouse for all of their permitting while they were trying to get through all the different agencies. They even needed a wetlands permit from Army Corps, of all things, which was very surprising, right? Well, the church property had become so saturated over the years that it newly qualified for a wetlands permit, which was, right, it was terrible. It was very unexpected. Right, qualified. That's a much better way to put it, right? And I still participate in weekly construction meetings. If you drive by, you can see it. There was recently a lot of publicity. The historic church has been lifted up. The concrete pours should start this week on the 1960s building. The concrete foundation is going to get poured. It's going to have the fall to cure, and then the hope is before the end of the year, we're going to be able to set the 1920s building back down on this brand new foundation, and construction will continue. And it's a really exciting, beautiful project. The county executive, former county executive Ike Leggett, council members have all been involved in supporting the church. Next slide. Another big project that the Historic Preservation Office has spearheaded is the Mapping Segregation Project. So we were really fortunate that we were able to undertake this project to identify racially exclusionary language within the deeds, racial restrictive covenants in the Down County region. And we were only able to do this project in the Historic Preservation Office because the Planning Board and the County Council saw fit to fund it. Right? We received additional funding so that we could hire more historians, hire more staff, and then undertake the outreach and finish phase 1 of the project. So it's these types of special projects where, with the support of the Planning Board and the Council, that historic preservation is we have the capacity to do this extra work, this really important work. And the Mapping Segregation Project was one of the top priorities of the Planning Department's equity agenda and planning that the department adopted in 2020. Next slide. Another initiative that our office has been involved with is Maryland's LGBTQ Heritage Project. So this was a collaborative effort with our office, with the Historic Preservation Office and Planning, with Preservation Maryland, the City of Baltimore, and the Maryland Historical Trust to write a statewide historic context focused exclusively on LGBTQ history. I applied for a grant, worked with the City of Baltimore and with Preservation Maryland to write the statewide context. And then there's a book, Planting the Rainbow Flag, that was a publication effort out of that. Our office, as part of the broader MNC-PPC, the whole commission family, participated this year at Capitol Pride for the first time. Brian Crane was instrumental in getting that set up. It was really quite an effort where the commission passed out hundreds of free copies of the booklet. And the wonderful thing about Capitol Pride is not just people from Washington, D.C., right? It's people from all over the region, sometimes all over the country, who are coming here to the nation's capital, and then they got access to this publication. Next slide. So as part of documenting and celebrating LGBTQ heritage, our office has pursued a National Register listing for the Robert Coggin House. Robert Coggin was the founder of the LGBTQ rights movement in Montgomery County. The role that the Historic Preservation Commission played in that is that for every National Register listing, that before it goes to the state, before it goes to the feds, there's a public hearing that's held at the Historic Preservation Commission. So the HPC voted in favor of sending this nomination forward to the state and supported our research efforts. So this was also funded with another grant that I got from the Maryland Historical Trust to write the National Register nomination. And we were very happy that we believe this is the first suburban 20th century resource to be found eligible for its importance to LGBTQ history in the state of Maryland. Next slide. Another effort that our office is undertaking is the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Project. So again, this was another grant that I got from the Maryland Historical Trust. It was a non-cap grant. So we were able to use some of our internal survey funding from the planning department, coupled that with a $20,000 grant from the state to hire a consultant to survey all of Montgomery County for sites associated with Asian American history. This is a theme that is critically underrepresented in our designated historic resources within our inventory. So the consultants went all over the county. We documented over 100 sites associated with Asian American heritage, and coming out of this, we also conducted over a dozen oral histories. We have these interviews, we have these transcripts, we'll be posting this on our website, and now we have an idea about what sites may be important for Asian American heritage so that we can pursue these listings in future master plan amendments. And also the outreach was a critically important part of this entire project, to be able to go to Korean churches, go into Chinese communities, talk to business owners, talk to all kinds of people in the county who were not aware of historic preservation, who may not have been aware of the work of the planning department either. And we made some really wonderful connections with people who were interested in the project. As part of it, we also rolled out a GIS map where the public can come and add sites that they think are important to their communities. It's available in several languages. It's available in Korean, in Vietnamese, and in Mandarin Chinese. And we're going to be translating the final report and all of the oral histories as well before we post those on our website. It's a really wonderful project. Next slide. And then we come to our remarkable Montgomery Untold Stories. So our office, again, with funding that was approved by the planning board and the council, we got a small amount of funding to undertake some historic marker research and manufacturing. So we have 4 markers that we just completed, one for the Commonwealth Farm that has been installed in Peachwood Local Park, one for Lavinia Engel that is in Forest Glen Neighborhood Park, one documenting the very important African-American Horad and Sewell families here in Wheaton. This one is going to be installed in Wheaton Veterans Park later this year. And then we have our last marker that's going to be installed at the Forest Glen Metro, commemorating the Beltway March of 1966. So this will also be installed later this year. Another big project that we undertook, I know, I'm just going on, was our street and park facilities naming review project. This was mandated by the county council. in 2020, or no, the county executive, no, I'm sorry, it was the county council who wrote to the county executive and his agencies and to Park and Planning and said, look at all of your resources, your streets and your public facilities for those that are named after or that honor Confederates, and do your work to rename those as quickly and judiciously as you can. So our park and planning historians all sort of swung into action and started to do the research about what were these assets potentially named after Confederates. After the first phase of the project, we identified 3 streets that had been named after Confederates, and the planning director renamed those streets to honor civil rights and historical figures from the Scotland community, from the Potomac African American community, and then those streets were renamed. You can see here the sign from Jeb Stuart Court coming down and it being renamed Geneva Mason Court, and those are members of Geneva Mason's family. Geneva Mason was an instrumental civil rights activist who protected the Scotland community from urban renewal in the 1960s. Next slide. So that, again, is just sort of a broad overview. In each of these projects that I've talked about, there has been an intersection between the HPC, the Historic Preservation Office, the Planning Board, the Council. Well, I can go on environmental resilience, which is the next pillar, unless anybody has any, comments, thoughts. Nope. All right. Moving ahead. So under environmental resilience, I don't have copies of this at everybody's seat, but we started to see in the late 2000s, late 20-teens, there were a lot of applications for solar panels that came through. And we did not have any specific design guidelines at the HPC to guide our applicants, to guide homeowners, or to guide the commissioners in how we should review these projects that were coming in. So the HPC tackled this with a white paper that they adopted, a policy paper adopted in 2020, and then illustrated guidelines that they adopted in 2021. So for the planning board members, you have a copy of these illustrated guidelines here. The HPC took as the jumping off point the county council's resolution. When the county council, in 2017, it was a resolution about emergency climate mobilization that basically directed all the county agencies and departments to come up with policies and procedures to tackle climate change within everybody's purview, and the HPC took that very seriously. From 2018 to 2023, I'm really pleased to say that the HPC has approved 98 solar projects. We have our 99th on the commission agenda this coming month in November, and they have denied exactly 0 solar projects. The idea with the design guidelines for anything is to get our applicants to a yes. The idea is that you can, manage the design. It starts with the premise that there is almost always a good place for solar technology on a property, and it's just getting the owner to the right place. Another initiative that our office has been involved in, this in partnership with the City of Tacoma Park, has been a series of webinars and other outreach related to accessory dwelling units. The HPC approves accessory dwelling units all the time, frequently. I stopped trying to pull up all the representative projects because frankly it became too many. And there have been accessory dwelling units approved in almost every historic district inside the Beltway over the last 10 years. So Dan Bruckert on our team led a webinar and some other outreach efforts with the City of Tacoma Park, with Lisa Govoni, our housing lead, and with the Department of Permitting Services. These webinars were to help homeowners understand what are all the steps they need to go through to get an accessory dwelling unit built on their property. Again, all the things to get the applicants to a yes. And these are just pictures of accessory dwelling units that the HPC has reviewed and approved in Kensington, Tacoma Park, and I think the one on the bottom is from the Linden Historic District.
They can't hear me. No.
Because it's a pickup for the recording.
Oh, the question was that these accessory dwelling units, do they have to follow a specific architectural requirement to match with the existing historic home.
They do have to undergo design review. They don't have to match the historic house. Would any of the commissioners like to talk about what you look at for an ADU project that comes in? Vice Chair Burdett.
So when an ADU comes forward, actually any exterior change to a historic property or the addition to that property or an ADU within on the property, first and foremost, if it's in a historic district, it needs to meet their guidelines as far as what is allowed. Okay, and that comes with latitude, because where we'll talk about ADUs, but where it's located, is it visible from the street? Is it, we don't necessarily like them to look exactly like the historic property. We want there to be an obvious difference between the original historic resource and the newer property. But occasionally you do get something where it would be a dramatic difference. Doesn't happen very often. Usually most people want in a historic district, they want it to blend in. But occasionally something does come that's very different. And at that point, then it really is, where is it located on the property? Where is it, who can see it? And is it appropriate? And is it well designed? And with as many architects as we have on the commission right now, they always get a wealth of advice that they can ignore. But, yeah.
At their peril.
Yes. So there really is quite a bit of latitude. And again, if it's a historic site, not in a historic district, then it's really just meeting the criteria of the county, the national parks criteria, and that really is pretty broad. So again, we had a school that was going in behind a historic house up county. We're going to see that next. Oh, okay. Because what they were doing was very contemporary, but referenced the historic nature of the property. So yeah, you get to see it. Oh, great. I remembered the right thing.
So for example, if my daughter wants purple, I'm just curious.
If it's in Tacoma Park, it'd probably go over really well. Or Rockville has had its moments of bright colors and on its Victorian houses. But we don't, we don't really do paint color.
No,
Yeah.
we don't worry about that.
Yeah,
Because it can be repainted.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, yeah.
I didn't know, okay.
But also, that the solar panels that's where we come from is the solar panels will eventually one day be replaced with something else. So they can be taken off and the roof repaired and the house is back to where it was. Some of the projects that have come through have had Tesla roofs where the shingle itself is the solar element, which they're really nice looking. But, technology is going to get better and better and better, so things do change. Things can be restored. All the time we restore historic properties.
Great, thank you. So we actually have a picture of the Tesla shingle roof coming up, but you can see it. It's really hard to get a good picture of this one property, but it's on the lower left. It's 54 Walnut Avenue. If you'd like to take a swing by, that was our first Tesla shingle roof that replaced an asphalt shingle roof. All right, next slide. So this was a wonderful project. So this is the Spencer Carr Master Plan historic site. And this was the first solar array that was approved by the HPC. So they had to get a historic area work permit. So you can see the little historic house and the dairy barn in the foreground and the wonderful farm fields. And then in the back is the church with the larger red roof. But then you see in the back is the whole solar field. And the HPC permitted and approved this out in one meeting. The fencing, all of the associated electrical work that had to go with it, and the array. And then on the right, you can just see the aerial view a little bit higher up. You can't see the solar field from the road at all. The topography really slopes down in the back. But the HPC has approved a lot of projects actually with visible solar panels as well on the front of the properties. But this was the first array.
That's in the ag reserve?
I don't think the Spencer Car House is in the ag reserve. No, this was built before that amendment that permitted solar arrays in the ag reserve. Yeah.
This one is East County, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, it's off of, Michael, do you remember what the address is? I can look it up. Yes. Yes, exactly. Great. It is. So there's the church, and they run they run a daycare center and a small school out of the dairy barn. So the dairy barn has been adaptively reused as a school building and as a community center. And then it's off the picture, but to the east there's a private school, like in a modern building, and they share the field space. Yes. Yes, there is. And the church also grows all those fields in the front. They are vegetable and community gardens that they donate all the produce to the food bank. Yep. So the idea too with the solar array was to generate some income to restore the historic house, to restore some more of the historic buildings on the property, and as income for the church. I don't know. I don't know, to tell you the truth, but you could be right to the north. This is a picture looking north. Yep. So economic competitiveness is the third pillar of Thrive Montgomery 2050. So one initiative that the Historic Preservation Office and the County Council, the HPC, and then also the Planning Board were involved in reviewing this. So there was a recent ZTA in 2022, ZTA 2206, that expanded allowable uses of certain designated historic properties. Basically what this did, for residentially zoned master plan sites, it expanded the number of allowable commercial uses. It started with a request from the Oakdale Community Church out of Olney, who own this on the left. That's a master plan site. That church, there was a group that wanted to operate a coffee shop out of the church. And so they had asked the council member and HP staff, what could we look at in the zoning ordinance? And it seemed like a great idea. Everybody agreed, like this was a great idea. The HPC reviewed this ZTA and voted unanimously to support it. There's a specific review role for the HPC when these uses come in. And then when it came to the planning board as well, it was unanimously supported at the planning board. It went through council very quickly, and it will be applicable to sites such as the Bethesda Community Store here that is zoned as residential but has had a little commercial use operating out of it from some time, could be expanded. And then also applicable, just another example, for the Locust Grove Magruder House that's located in Bethesda. And there's lots of other sites this will be applicable to, but this was actually a really exciting ZTA. We're just waiting for somebody to come in and use it. No, they haven't. No, it hasn't come in yet. I'm hoping they come in, because it would be wonderful. It'd be wonderful for that space.
So was the church vacant? I mean, what?
No, the church, they do have services.
Okay.
They
But
do
it's-
have
so
services
the
there.
coffee house is on the side somewhere or not?
They haven't been able to open the coffee house in there yet on a permanent basis. That would be the idea, that they could operate it out of there permanently.
Okay.
So this is the project that Vice Chair Burdett was talking about. Oh, We lost it on the other screens. But up in the Clarksburg Rural Village Historic District, on the lower left, there's a rendering of a yellow house. That's Hammer Hill. When you're driving up Frederick Road in Clarksburg, you see it on your left, like perched up on the hill, this big, beautiful yellow house. And in back of it, the property owner wanted to partner with a daycare and a school to build a whole new facility. The planning board approved that preliminary plan, and the HPC has reviewed several preliminary consultations and recommended approval. They're coming in for their final historic area work permit very soon. So you can see that kind of in the middle, and then on the upper right are some illustrative slides, exactly what the vice chair was talking about. It is a modern building. There will be several, I think over 300 students it has the capacity for in that space. It'll be a modern like daycare school facility. And the schools in Clarksburg, I think as many people know, are already very overcrowded. There's a lot of new people that have been moving to Clarksburg. They need childcare. And along the way, the HPC made recommendations about some of the access points, some of the designs, and got the applicant, very, very quickly to a yes for this. Is there anything else that you would want to mention about it, or anything that struck you, or Vice Chair Petty?
I remember that, I don't know, maybe, by the way, I'm a civil engineer, I'm a bridge design, and I have been working for county government, Department of Transportation. So I used to bring projects to HPC Gwen at that time. It was Gwen Marcus at that time. She was my point of contact. And the visual effect of a project to historic structure, it was a big deal. And I remember that some of the projects we had to change because they said that the view site, it has to be out of the view site, because if you build a building like that, it's going to impact the historic view or historic surrounding. It looks like that we are going away from that, what I'm hearing, because it's not historic, you could remove it, but it used to be that you couldn't do this. I remember it, unless,
This particular project actually had that issue in that when it came in, it's pulled away in a certain area away from a part of the property that would have been out of sight. So we asked them, how come this isn't down here where it would be lower and out of sight? And that was a stormwater, that was an area that was a wetlands, and also they wanted to use it for stormwater management, and it was not going to be a good idea to build down there anything, no matter what it looked like. So we agreed with them. It's like, no, this new building needs to be pulled up. It's going to be within sight, but you can't really tell from the material, from these images, but they selected materials that would be appropriate for an old farm structure. The materials of the roof, the materials of the walls. So it isn't this glaringly urban building. It looks like a building that would fit on a former farm property.
Yeah.
And it can still function the way it needs to be, and it's out of the wetlands and the stormwater
Actually, I'm
areas.
very happy to see that, because it shows that we are moving with time and we allow for economical competitiveness and also for ADUs and all of those. That's fantastic, because it's going to increase people to like to be in historic areas or to upgrade them, because there is not difficult if you want to do other things. So it adds to likeliness of this project among everyone. I think is great.
Can I say something about that project? To address that issue of the view shed, actually, they came up with a creative solution here. So the roof of the daycare center is actually split because of the grade. If you're looking at the primary elevation of the historic house, there's a split so that the house still reads against the skyline, so that it's not as much of an impact.
So we'll take a tour when they open. We'll be there. Yeah. This was a wonderful project. They had a great team. They were open to the design review advice, and as you know, you guys just heard, you know, the HPC was very open to making this happen. This is going to be a great addition to the Clarksburg Historic District. Okay, next slide. So this, we're going to play a little, so this video just finished. This work is ongoing right now at the Flower Theater on Flower Avenue. You can go check it out. But John, can you start the video, and this will tell you about the project.
Doing other repairs shop so it can be refabricated. So the replacement sign that goes up there looks exactly like the one that we see today. It's being done in partnership with the community and a grant. The facade has fallen into disrepair over the years, and it's an opportunity to restore it to its 1950 appearance. The site was designated in 2014. The designation process is a multi-step process where the Historic Preservation staff develops a nomination, and they take that to the Historic Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission makes a recommendation to the Planning Board. The Planning Board then reviews it and makes a recommendation to the County Council, and the County Council votes on the final language and designation, and it has the effect of law or the equivalent of any master plan that they would approve.
The theater has been kind of in disrepair for at least 50 years. It's had a continual tenant while they have done a lot of interior improvements or maintenance of the interior to make sure that they can continue to use the space. The facade has continued to fall into disrepair. And so the lighting has been cut off for at least a decade. It's been impossible to actually light this. What we're hoping to do is bring this back to life, at least on the facade, because what that will allow is a beautiful aesthetic that brings up the feeling and the pedestrian enjoyment in the neighborhood. We want to bring more people down into Long Branch. We are supporting the small businesses, and so what we would like to do is make sure that people want to come see what's going on in Long Branch. They want to feel that step back in time to 1950 when this first opened up. There's so many people in the community who have reached out to me and talked to me about, you know, that they grew up here, that they've lived down the street for 30 years, or they remember coming here when it was a dollar theater, and they're so happy to see it relit. They're very excited to come and just be in the vicinity.
So this was a wonderful project that I wish Dan were here to thank him. But Dan has been working with MHP. I worked with MHP. They reached out to me about a year and a half ago They wanted to apply for a state grant to rehab the facade of the historic Flower Theater. So this is a designated master plan site. It was designated as part of the Long Branch plan with, you know, pretty serious opposition from the property owner. The HPC had recommended the entire building be designated. The council ultimately decided just the facade. So when MHP reached out saying they had this agreement with the property owner, it sounded wonderful. And then Dan worked with them on the historic area work permit that was approved by the staff. Didn't need to go to the Historic Preservation Commission. It met the approval for, you know, the criteria for staff approval. So we could approve the permit out in 5 days. For them, we worked with the Department of Permitting Services on their trade permits. The idea is that they are going to restore the neon sign, which restoring the neon was cheaper than going with LEDs. We worked with them on the quotes. I was also shocked, but the neon was cheaper. And Donahoe is cleaning the stone. They are completely rehabilitating the marquee, and we're going to get new video when it is relit this winter. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful project. And this was Amy's passion project, Amy Byrne from MHP. She's wonderful to work with, and so we're so excited to see it.
And also, the National Trust for Historic Preservation is starting a tour, or is doing a tour through on the Purple Line, and it's next weekend, I believe.
It is. It is next weekend.
And one of the stops is the Flower Theater.
Yes.
So, and they will have, it's a forum, the Trust Forum organization, which is mostly the top tier of preservationists and planners in the country, and they will be on that tour. So that is a significant feather in our county's cap to be on that tour.
Yep, absolutely. And it was the Purple Line Coalition that wanted to highlight the Flower Theater along the route for the attendees at the National Trust. All right, next slide. Yes, they are repointing the stone. They're cleaning all of that. Yes, the brick pieces and all. They're redoing all of the mortar. Yep. So that's a pretty decent segue into some information about financial incentives for historic preservation. I've talked a lot tonight about grants that folks have applied for from the state, so I'll run through this really quickly. So a little bit about our historic rehab tax credit program. So this is a program managed by the staff reviews all the tax credit projects, the HPC recommends they be approved, and then it goes to the Department of Finance. So this was a program created in Montgomery County in 1984. It offers a 25% credit off your county property taxes for eligible rehab expenses. Just last year, we had 144 applications for over $4 million in eligible expenses. Every year, it toggles sort of between $4 and $6 million in eligible expenses. So what that means is you get, in the end, it comes out to like $1 to $1.5 million actually applied towards county property taxes. There are some criteria that people have to meet, and on the bottom, these are just examples over the years of successful rehab projects. Next slide. So we have here the eligible expenses, examples, and ineligible expenses, basically qualifying rehab work, and then what is not eligible. New construction is not eligible. Repaving your driveway is not eligible. Interior work is not eligible. Though interestingly, in Prince George's County, for their local tax credit, they do give a credit for interior work, which is very different from ours. But here, no interior work. Can't get a credit for landscaping, and also your material and equipment purchases don't qualify for the tax credits, but professional services, like for design fees or architectural fees, those do qualify for the tax credit. Next slide. So this is just a wonderful example. If folks haven't been to the National Park Seminary, please do. Please go. Save Our Seminary still gives tours of this. This is one of the really the premier examples we have here in Montgomery County. We have a before and after picture here that is actually highlighted on the website of the Alexander Company. And the Alexander Company rehabbed some of the main dormitory buildings for affordable apartments and market rate apartments. My sister actually moved into one of the first available affordable apartments over 20 years ago when they first opened. And then EYA built single-family homes and townhomes that helped to generate some of the income that helped with the affordable component and with some of the historic rehab component. And there are still buildings in the National Park Seminary that are still coming in for rehabilitation. But this specific component of it with the Alexander Company won a slew of national housing awards, not just historic preservation awards, but affordable housing awards as well. And it's a wonderful complex. You can bike through it. If folks haven't been, definitely go. Next slide. So we're kind of wrapping it up with the prioritizing surveys of potential historic sites and districts. So this is a topic that I know is a real priority for the HPC, for the Historic Preservation Office. I know that both of the chairs discussed this somewhat. It really has to do with sites that are still listed on the Locational Atlas and Index of Historic Sites. Next slide. So we still have 130 resources, individual resources that are on the Locational Atlas. Most, but not all, are in the Ag Reserve. And again, the Locational Atlas listings, because they were made in the 1970s, they just focus on architectural style. They're just what you could see from the road. They don't talk about archaeology. They really don't talk about African American history very much either. Next slide. And we still have 13 districts that are located on the Locational Atlas as well. So the next slide I had, I think, was just other business and then wrapping up. So we can back it up a little bit. And I wonder if our chair, Bob Sutton, has anything to say about the Locational Atlas, or if any members have anything to say about your survey priorities for the planning board.
Well, I think this, I'll tell you, when I first came on this, and we had a project on Locational Atlas, and I had to scratch my head several times and ask a lot of questions because I had no clue what it was. And finally, I understood what it is. But I think it would be from our end, I think it'd be very useful for us to at least try to look at a lot of these sites that have been identified. I think some probably are are not in good shape. Probably there are some that should be nominated for the locational atlas soon. And I know it's expensive, but I would like, this to me is a high priority because I think it really doesn't look good for us, if anyone paid attention, that we have all these sites out there that have been there since the 70s, and we haven't really done much with them. So that's a high priority for me.
I agree, because oftentimes when we're working to save a property or a site in the county and it's a contentious property, they'll say, well, but you have these 130 up county, how come you haven't done anything with them? And what isn't understood is when these were surveyed in the 70s, it was basically a from the road, and it was a one-page survey visual. That was it. Now, to do a proper survey like we'd have to do for a master plan designation, it's a very expensive process, and it takes a very long time. You can't get away with a one-page survey anymore. It's not going to cut it. And now it isn't just the architectural elements. You have to research the people that lived there, all of the people who lived there, whether it was the property owners or the people who worked on the property, or maybe somebody who was associated with the property long after the fact. You have to do the archaeology to see what was there beforehand. So it's a very expensive process and a lengthy process, and it needs to have funding. And right now, most locational atlas sites that get actually surveyed and report written to go on the designation track do it because the area master plan is up for review. And then it's a couple of properties get an opportunity to be reviewed. And what would be nice is to have a continual small funding every year to do a couple of these properties, irregardless of whatever else is going on. Maybe the ones that are most risk, the ones with the best history, the best potential for history, the ones we know there is interesting history that, frankly, 50 years ago, nobody would have paid attention to that aspect of the property's history. And I think if we had the continual funding to do 2-3 properties a year, then we would knock a lot of these off. It would take years to do, but we could knock a lot of these, or I shouldn't say knock them off. We should.
Knock 'em on.
We could knock them on. We could get them designated, and at the same time enrich our understanding of the county's agricultural history, because again, that is a part of our history that we're only just beginning to understand everybody that was involved in these properties.
Yeah, so thank you for letting us know that. So what I understand is that there's no, even though there was a quick way to put them on, there's no quick way to take them off. Is that?
That's correct. In order to in order to remove a property, you're basically putting it to the test of should it be listed to the master plan for historic preservation. You're applying the criteria in 24A3 because you're asking the question, should it be designated to the master plan? Yes, and then it moves forward, or does it not meet these criteria? So that's a no, and then you take it off.
Right, but it takes time and money to even do a no.
Yes.
Okay.
But the nice thing is, from our perspective, is if we recommend a no and we send it to you, it can stop there. I mean, you can take it off at that point. It doesn't have to go to county council.
Right, but you still have to do the work.
Right.
Yes.
We still have to do the work, but it can stop, I mean, it can be taken off by the planning board.
Right, okay, great.
Can you turn on your mic? I want them to get it. It's okay.
What if the property is gone?
So the HPC, as you know, you just adopted a policy about non-extant master plan sites, so we can apply a lot of that to the locational atlas sites. To Vice Chair Burditt's point, though, if something has been demolished or isn't there anymore, we have other sites that have been designated for archaeology. There might be a cemetery on the property. We have sites that are designated because they have some really cool singular outbuildings, like some stone bank barns, or there might be a domestic quarters of. So all that to say, just because the main house is, we would still need to do the work.
Right.
it might not be as much work because we're not writing about it, but we have to research the people, the archaeological. There might be prehistoric archaeological potential. It's not an exhaustive list, but there is still some work involved in that.
And right now, there's really very limited protection for some of the buildings and structures that are on the site. So, you know, they're aging, they're falling apart, and we're going to lose some of these just because they're in the locational atlas. There's really limited protection, you know, if it is a valuable resource.
Really no protection. I mean,
So if I could, because I know we're beyond the time that we had originally planned here, I will say that I will work with Rebecca. We'll give some thought to how we could potentially kind of go through what the process might look like for potentially moving some of these through the review. There's a lot there. So it would take a long time and a lot of money, but some recurring type of funding is something we could think about. But just from even a staffing perspective, how would that look? And we'll give some thought to that, and we'll see. I know that we also have coming up in just a couple of years, we have the HP master plan will be 50 years old. So maybe we can tie some of this into that and kind of celebrating the master plan and taking a look at that as well. So we'll give some thought to all of this and see what we can come up with and propose for a future budget cycle.
So that sort of rolls us right into, well, I decide for other business, but then next slide, so everybody sees it. So these are the staff contacts for each of our groups with Alana, Jason, and myself for the planning board, for the planning department, and then for the HPC. I had no closing comments other than to say thank you so much for your time and your participation this evening. Chair Harris or Chair Sutton or Chair Harris.
I would also like to say thank you to everyone. This, it took, for all those that helped plan, because we were start thinking about, my staff, 3 months ago or something to do this. So it takes time, so thank you for making the time to do this, and thank you for all those behind the scenes that put this together tonight, you know, to get the food, to do the technical support over here, to thank you, legal counsel there. So thank you all. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to continuing conversations and our next meeting next year sometime, this time. But thank you so much, and if you have any comments or questions, please call us. And then, I don't know, do we need to take a picture before we leave? A quick picture, because the people have to leave. Oh, yeah, okay, well, the meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you.